Welcome to Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release, a podcast dedicated to licensed wildlife rehabilitators and the veterinarians who support them. I'm your host, Gail Buell. This is part 2 of my discussion with Jessika Madison-Kennedy. She's a wildlife rehabilitator here in Minnesota, and we are discussing Northern Cardinals. What a fantastic bird. We've talked a lot about feeding and how to support them and soft releases, which we'll talk more about soft releases and release in a little bit here. But how about housing? So at the beginning, if you've got a cardinal like you have, or maybe a little younger, would you use an incubator?
Yes, I would use an incubator. That would be my first choice, and I would set it to 97 to 98 degrees. I don't know if you can hear the bird, but I am actually feeding him right now as we're talking because he has to eat a lot. But I would set the brooder to 98 degrees, and I wouldn't go just by the thermostat, but I would go by how the bird feels. So I would check him a few times as I'm getting the temperature stabilized. And once I know that the bird is warm, the temperature's even, then you can kind of relax and know that you're at a good point.
Do you worry
And
about humidity at all?
I do. I will take like a mason jar. I'll fill it with water and then just a couple drops of like bird safe disinfectant so that no mildew or anything grows. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'll cover it with, I have these little mesh like seed sprouting lids that you can put on, but you can come up with something. But I do like to cover it just in case it, the bird
It
gets
tips or something.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
just to be on the safe side. Um, and then that will emit humidity. And also I'll put like a dishcloth in there and that will wick the moisture.
Ah, okay.
So I will do that. If you don't have a brooder, there's other ways to create this environment, though. You can use a heating pad with some sort of like dome that has obviously airflow, but you can be creative. What you want to do is create a little microenvironment that is about 97 to 98 degrees and
Okay.
keeps the bird at this even temperature. And because they're open cup nesters, you don't need to cover the bird, but it is good to have a little bit of shelter because they do tend to nest around foliage. So they are somewhat protected. You don't want a brooder
Mm-hmm.
with the bird just sitting in the middle of this open, vast space. I like to put like a little towels nearby or just some sort of barrier so the bird has a sense of security and protection.
Okay. Okay. And would you kind of cover them a little bit, like with a paper towel or something? So it's kind of, or not so much there, but you're gonna put stuff around your nest.
Yeah, what I do is I have a little kind of like a critter carrier type thing. And then I
Mm-hmm.
have a little bunch of fake green leaves that I will just kind of drape over it.
Oh, I like it.
I can disinfect them periodically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's believed that this is important for their security and that is good for their health. So if they feel
Okay.
secure, you recreate the natural environment as much as you possibly can because one thing I've learned about this bird in particular is there's so much we don't know, and there's probably a lot we still don't know. So the more you can replicate what they would experience in the wild, the more likely you're to cover anything that matters as far as
Mm-hmm.
development.
Natural history. We're always preaching natural history. So natural history tells you a lot about how to rehabilitate them.
I agree 100%. I think most of my rehabilitation I gained from reading natural history. Like
Mm-hmm.
what I know is mostly from that source.
Exactly. And like you said earlier, and you've mentioned a couple times how much research has been done with Northern Cardinals. So we have a lot more information than we do on some of the other species that we raise.
Yeah.
So excellent. That is so excellent. Okay, so now when do they get out of the incubator or little brooder that you have put together?
Yeah, so once they start to get feathers on their body, that gives them a little more insulation. And
Mm-hmm.
At this point, they're also starting to stand, so they're starting to perch a little bit. And
Hmm.
if you think about it, they leave the nest in about 9 to 13 days. They don't
Hmm.
go far though. They stay on a branch, typically very close to the nest, and don't really go anywhere. So the next stage would be a slightly smaller enclosure with a reduced heat source, which would be like a butterfly mesh cage, one of those pop-up cubes.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can use a lot of different, you can use a tub. I like something with good airflow though, so I will use one of those cages.
Hmm.
You can use a wire cage, but a lot of people shy away from that because it can damage feathers. So
Hmm.
it really depends on the bird and your comfort with it. I will use a wire cage and keep an eye, and usually it's fine, but the mesh cages are really good and they're ideal to
Hmm.
protect the feather conditions. So whatever you do, you don't want to be having the feathers rub up against the sides of the cage.
Right, right. How do you keep you so you've still got some heat source there. So how
Yeah.
do you do it with that? Is it heating pad on the side, heating pad on the bottom, covering the whole thing? What does that look like?
Any of those, to be honest, because they're perching, they're typically not on the floor of the cage. Heat
Hmm.
rises, so I will tend to put it on the bottom. Sometimes I'll kind of wrap it around the side. It depends on the situation. If I'm up, have them on a table and there's a wall, I will take the heating pad and have half of it behind them and half of it under them.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'll kind of work with it, but what I'm looking for is an ambient temperature that is keeping the bird warm. So I will just take the bird's body, touch it against my wrist, and as long as they feel warm and they look good, then
Hmm.
I know that we're doing fine.
Oh, I know what I forgot to ask earlier. So you know how some birds when they gape and part of this I'm going to ask this question for identification purposes.
Yes.
Is some birds when they gape you can really tell what bird species they are because there's kind of a runway of dots or spots or things like that in the mouth. Do cardinals have anything like that?
Um, they don't have anything quite that striking. Like cedar waxwings have this little neon purple hue to the inside of their mouth that most
Hmm.
birds don't have. But cardinals do have a distinct gape. It's pinkish, kind of a
Hmm.
pink color. Their overall body is a pinkish hue, and their gape flanges are thin and they're almost a whitish yellow.
Okay.
The way I identify a cardinal first is I can look at their face and just the shape of their head and their eyes is what I know it's definitely a cardinal because there are other birds that have pinkish to red mouths, but they have a distinct profile.
Okay. And that of course comes with experience, right?
Yes, it
If
comes with experience, but you can find pictures too. So if you're looking online for hatchling cardinal, and you're not sure you have a cardinal, I would recommend looking at all of these things, but also look at that profile. And when you
Mhm.
see it, you see it.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
they also have kind of fluffy, fuzzy head tufts and down on their body, on their back. It's kind of like hair. It looks like hair. And
Okay.
they have, if they're not newly hatched, they start to get little feather growth patterns on their chest as well.
And then
So,
you said when the feathers start coming in, you can kind of pretty much identify them as a cardinal
yeah.
with the color and whether it's a male or female, which is really cool because not all birds you can do that.
And I would say they start off looking like a female always. They're brown. They're a little
Hmm.
more brown than green or red, but this, as they grow up, usually always before release, you'll know if you have a male or a female. So
Okay.
they do get that coloration towards the end of their juvenile stage, but the young ones are kind of a dull brown, kind of a greeny brown. They look
Okay.
a little more like the female at first.
Okay. So back to caging and housing. So we have a bird that doesn't need an incubator anymore, but still has some heat support. Butterfly type caging is usually better than metal caging. And now the bird is starting to, it's got more feathers. It's maybe doesn't need as much heat support. So what does the space look like now?
So as they start to show interest in foraging, I will expand their cage and in fact even put them out in the aviary early and hand
Oh, okay.
And I'll tell you, put the cage in the aviary. And the only reason I personally hesitate with the butterfly cage is at that stage, they should have a good visual of their surrounding area.
Okay.
And so if I feel like this particular bird is good in a metal cage, and I'm very cautious about suggesting the metal cage because they can cause issues, but I am attentive in a way, and I've had the experience. I kind of can see if it's working or not before it becomes a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to have them so they have a good, clear visual of their surrounding area so they can see the trees and they can see the outside world because that's what they would have in the wild. The
Mm-hmm.
metal cage, I worry a little bit about just, they're in this white kind of opaque cube. I don't know. It's good for the beginning, but I like to get them out quickly where they are kind of out in the wild in a sense.
Okay. Okay. Well, and that makes sense. I mean, birds are visual animals. They really, and color is very important. So if you live in an opaque world and that's what you think the color is supposed to be, but it's not, it's going to be a rude awakening.
Yeah, so you can see there's pros and cons. And,
Mm-hmm.
years ago when we were working at the wildlife hospital, we had some volunteer who made these wonderful wood dowel cages.
Mm-hmm.
So they were these smooth wood dowels, and they were like a wire cage, but made out of kind of a softer material. Those were
Right.
fantastic. So I'm always looking for, creative ways to kind of create a little environment. You could do a Rubbermaid tub type thing with the open front, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mesh on one side, maybe plexiglass. I don't know. Like there's creative ways, but I'm always experimenting, trying to improve upon the house.
Right. So you have them out in the larger aviary, and then you release them out into that aviary when you feel that they're kind of ready, and then you can continue to support by hand feeding while they're foraging in a bigger area. What does that aviary look like?
Yeah, my aviary is not that big. I have a small space in St. Paul, so I have to be a little conservative with the space, but it is about 4 feet by 6 feet.
Okay.
And then I have another second one that is 4 feet by 8 feet. And what I'll do is I'll start the bird in the aviary in a smaller cage because I don't
Mm-hmm.
want that feeling vulnerable. Sometimes a little bird kicking around a big aviary just it doesn't work out. They get stressed and
Mm-hmm.
they find them sitting in the corner. You don't want that to happen. So I'll start them
Mm-hmm.
in a small cage in the aviary. And then as they start moving around more and showing me that they're interested in foraging, I will then let them out of I'll kind of slowly like step up to the larger space.
Okay. Okay. What is that cage made out of?
Yeah, I built my cage out of the frame is cedar 2x2s and four
Mm-hmm.
by 4s. And then there's 2 layers of protection. So the outside of the aviary is 1/2 inch hardware cloth.
Mm-hmm.
And there's about an inch and a half buffer. And then on the inside, it's soft vinyl window screen.
Okay. Okay. And then hardware cloth on the bottom?
I laid brick. So I have a brick.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. And under the brick is like a foot of gravel, so it's predator proof.
Mm-hmm.
My aviary is mouse proof even. I have made it airtight so there's no mice can get into it either.
I love it. That's hard to do. That is
Yeah,
hard to do.
and I did it, but the only reason I feel like I was able to do is that as I had a lot of experience working with aviaries that other people have built. So I kind of had a good opportunity over time to recognize what works, what doesn't work, what functions well and what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
So this little buffer of air between the hardware cloth is great for predator proof because what will happen is animals will reach in and grab the birds when they're roosting at night.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
is a common issue because birds in an aviary, eventually predators will find it and they'll start to, you know, try to get those birds.
Oh, right. Of course, because it looks like it's an easy meal. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we definitely have to protect them. Um, something else I was going to ask about that, and of course I don't remember.
Well,
So
I can explain it a little more too.
yeah.
I make sure that there is at least one side that is protected from the elements. So My aviary has one solid wall and then a shingle roof over the top, and then
Mm-hmm.
all the other sides are open. And
Okay.
the direction it faces is um, south and southeast. So in my particular microclimate in my yard, it's kind of the perfect, they get the right amount of sun, but if the weather is poor, they have places where they're protected from
Okay. Okay.
rain and wind and things like this. So it's kind of a good combination. There's always a shady spot. There's usually always a sunny spot. And that's another thing is natural sunlight, right? Because birds can get metabolic bone disease if they don't get vitamin D. So part of the supplementation that we were talking about earlier with
Mm-hmm.
the insect diet is some of that supplementation I carry it on through the whole time they're in rehabilitation. So
Okay.
they'll make sure they get a little bit of this vitamin on their food every day,
Okay.
um, just to make sure that metabolic bone disease doesn't occur while they're in captivity.
Yep. That, yeah, you'd hate to have that happen. And that's a direct result of not feeding the right things. So yeah, you would hate that because you put so much work into it and then the animal unfortunately can't be released at that
Yeah.
point and often has to be euthanized. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And a lot of species come in with it in the wild. It's something that, rehabilitators are starting to see, and we don't always know why, but cardinals are not typically prone to it. So,
mhm.
we make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so explain more about the caging. What does it look like on the inside? How do you get into it? How do you get in? How do you get into it?
How do I get in? Yes, I built an antechamber. So mine has two doors
Hmm.
because my strong, strong belief with birds is you always want two safety, two levels of safety for whatever the situation is. So to avoid having a bird escape, I have two doors always,
Hmm.
right? Uh,
Hmm.
Never just have one door and a bird and expect something to not go wrong because
Right, right.
so what I do is I go in the little room, I shut that door, I make sure there's no bird there, and then I move into the aviary. That
Okay.
is something I'm really, really strict about. So I make sure to do that. And then, once I'm inside the aviary, there's the brick floor. What I do is I lay down newspaper, and then on top of the newspaper, I will put some sort of natural substrate. So, um, if you look at the bottom tray of a conventional bird cage,
Hmm.
quite often it's like this 1 to 2 inch kind of rectangular or square um, like container. And what you can do is take those and fill them with dirt and grass and
Oh,
then
okay.
you really switch them out, clean them, do what you need to do. Like I know we're not talking about robins, but for
It's
American
okay.
robins, I'll fill it with dirt and then put earthworms in that tray. So it's
Hmm.
kind of a little segment of ground that you can create.
Hmm.
I'll lay down branches, just try to do my best to give them a slightly more naturalistic floor because cardinals don't tend to forage around brick,
Oh, really?
Exactly. And then I'll trim all my trees. Luckily, I have a lot of like random trees that pop up all around my house, so I have good access to, branches that can kind of mimic small trees.
Oh, yeah. I got a lot of those that pop up every spring. I should
Yeah.
be letting them get a little bit big and then cutting them down.
Right. Yeah. So it makes me a good gardener as well. But then, like I said, I put them in those gallon jugs of water. Those are fantastic because they're weighted. So it's like you can keep your branch alive a lot longer. And then they have a handle. So you can kind of tie that handle to maybe a post in the aviary to stabilize it just to be sure
Hmm.
it doesn't tip
Hmm.
over.
Okay.
Um, but that's what I do. And I do my best to create a cardinal habitat, basically.
Do you ever mix cardinals with other species? We mentioned earlier that sometimes they flock up with other species. So, if you do, then what species would you mix them with?
Um, yeah, so this is something I at one point was working on a chart of species that play well together because
Hmm.
sometimes when you put different species in a enclosure, they'll fight, right? But
Hmm.
cardinals are do pretty well with a lot of different birds. They're kind of mild-mannered as far as being juveniles. Once they're adults, that can be a
Hmm.
different story. Um, but I will put them with cedar waxwings. Um,
Hmm.
Chickadees, maybe. It kind of depends. Chickadees are a little bit aggressive, so I'm hesitant with those. I'll keep an eye on it.
Hmm.
Sometimes I only have two aviary spaces, so I will have to be a little strategic, but I spend a lot of time observing birds. One time in the past, I saw a mourning dove picking on a European starling.
What?
Yes, you'd think it would be the other way.
The other way around. I always think of mourning doves as being mild mannered when
Yeah,
it comes
no.
to other birds.
So, I one thing I've learned is just always assume you don't know. Even if you think you know, always be humble about it and assume that you don't know because there's a lot of combinations that will surprise you. But usually a Northern Cardinal will do well with a cedar waxwing.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
have you ever used cameras?
Yes, I do. I have a
Awesome.
bird cam. I use it quite a lot. It's a fantastic way to spy on the birds.
Mhm.
I also have a setup where my front porch has like a table right by the window. And if I go in the house, there's a blind that is kind of you can see out but not in basically. So I
Okay.
can spy on birds easily in my care. I'll put them out there. That way they're getting, it's a three-season porch, so they get all of the light and the sounds and they're nearly outside.
Hmm.
And I can also watch them from inside so I can see if they're behaving differently in my presence than if they're alone.
Right, because we influence them all the time, right? So being able to spy on them, and a
Yeah,
lot of cameras are a lot cheaper now than they used to be. Well, we'll see, but if they
yes.
go up in price, but right
Yeah, but
now
if
they're
you see me as
pretty
the food,
reasonable.
right, right. They're really affordable now. But if the bird sees me as a food source, it might beg, but I can get a better idea if they're actually starting to eat successfully by spying on them because when I'm not there, that's when they tend to, dig into the food and eat or
Right,
not.
and explore a little bit more and those kinds of
Yeah.
things. So,
Yeah.
amazing, amazing. When you have them in care like this, are there problems? You mentioned metabolic bone disease, but are there other things that you have to watch out for as far as developmental challenges or something that they start developing might be from the food or something like that?
I find with cardinals, the one problem that can happen is poor feather condition. They just can grow bad feathers, and that can be due to a number of things. It could be something to do with the husbandry, but it could also be a congenital issue. We don't always know what it is. So that is something I take great care to get the diet right so I can at least rule out
Hmm.
husbandry. I make sure that they get sunshine. I make sure that they get dirt baths so you can take sand or dirt and put that in trays. Cardinals also do something called anting, where they
Oh,
let ants crawl on them. Luckily, I have ants in my yard, and I do see them inside the aviary, so that gives them an opportunity to. What the cardinal will do is get low to the ground and let the ants crawl up on their feathers.
wow. And
And
then the ants kind of take care of any debris or anything that's on them? Is that what's going on?
uh, it's not entirely certain what they're doing, but people suspect that maybe the ant leaves behind some residual something or other that keeps parasites away.
Huh. And the cardinals don't eat the ants?
No, no. And starlings do this too. And I think there's other bird species that do anting.
Wow. I don't think I would could tolerate it. But I'm not a cardinal.
Yes, right. And another thing they do is they bask in the sun and they do this weird posture where they like spread their body out in
Hmm.
a way where it's almost like they're trying to expose as much of themselves and they'll let their head fall to the side, almost like they're falling asleep or something.
So
And
kind of pancake down with their wings and their tails spread,
exactly.
and then head to the side, and you're probably panicking, going, "Oh my gosh, did he just die?"
Yeah, if you don't know what they're doing, it's an alarming sight.
Hmm.
But birds will do this in the sun, and I think they're getting their vitamin D and they're maybe the sun helps with parasites too. There's a lot of things we don't know, but it's definitely something that seems important to them.
Wow. Well, I'm going to be a little anthropomorphic because I love the sun. I don't sunbathe, but I love the sun, and I'm like I could see where they would just totally enjoy it. In the spring as things start warming up and it's a sunny day, I just stand out in the sun for a little bit, just absorbing it. I just love it.
I think
So,
it must feel good. And,
mhm.
we are all animals, so it's, I think, okay to be that way with with the understanding that you could be wrong, but
Yep.
there's no harm in, assuming that they also enjoy things that we would enjoy.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now we've got the housing. And thanks for the description of your aviaries. Now you get to the birds eating on its own and doing really well. How often do you weigh them when they're in the aviary, or do you weigh them in the aviary?
I weigh them much less often. I look at their body condition. I will weigh them periodically to make sure that there's nothing going wrong because a lot of times, if there's an illness setting in, the first thing that happens is they lose weight, but they
Mm-hmm.
will hide it in their behavior. So it is
Mm-hmm.
good to get a weight, but you want to balance that out with handling the bird and catching the bird, because
Mm-hmm.
that's stressful and it lets them get comfortable around people, which we want to avoid. So as the bird becomes independent, you want to keep your presence as minimal as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
I will kind of use my own judgment. I'll weigh them periodically, maybe every 5 days. I kind of go by my sense of how well they're doing. I look at them and then I try to balance that, keeping an eye on the weight, but at the same time not interacting with the bird too much at that stage.
Now, most people probably will know this or have their own techniques, but when you are handling these birds, you're not bending the feathers, or if you are accidentally bending the feathers, you're correcting that because feathers are everything. Do you handle with gloves? Do you wash your hands beforehand and handle them that way? Um, what is your technique?
Yes, we all should wear gloves. That's kind of the newer. It wasn't always this way, but as rehabilitators, we, just with diseases and things, it's good practice to try to
Hmm.
wear gloves. If not, wash your hands well. I like to use a butterfly net to catch my birds.
Hmm.
Um, I'm pretty comfortable catching birds. One thing people should take care is don't use a net with a heavy frame because you could hurt the bird when you're going at the bird. So you have to be
Hmm.
gentle. It's better to let the bird get away than hurt it.
Hmm.
I'll also use like a tea towel and kind of throw it over the bird.
Okay.
If the bird is indoors and you're not quite outside, you can switch off the lights and catch the bird in the dark because we can see a little better than they can. So you can sneak up on them that way. But if
Hmm.
you're out in the aviary, for example, I will use a butterfly net. And one thing, here's a top pro tip. Be very careful because cardinals can bite hard.
Okay.
Powerful beaks, really powerful beaks. In fact, another thing I will point out about the cardinal that I always teach people is when I was training volunteers, their cardinals aspirate very easily with a 1 ml syringe. And I think the reason is the trabeculae in the beak, which is like the struts, it's like a bony structure that makes it strong but also
Hmm.
lightweight, is thick on the cardinal. And basically, if you're putting that syringe in, it makes it so the tip of the syringe points right at the glottis where you don't want it to go.
Oh, that is a good pro tip.
And I just noticed this over time. It was a problem that kept happening only with cardinals. And I just feel like there's something about the angle. You have to be very careful. So, a good way to hydrate a cardinal orally, and this is when they're older, not when they're a little baby. When they're a little baby, that mouth is a different type of mouth, right? It's a big,
Okay.
big mouth and it's easy.
Hmm.
But as they are older and maybe you have to hydrate a bird or you're trying to feed it, um, you could give them fluids by chopping up grapes, little
Oh, okay.
little pieces of grape.
Mhm.
Um, Or you could use a gavage needle and don't gavage them, but just use that little tip to kind of get it a little further into the mouth.
Further down. Okay. Okay. Oh, really good, good thoughts there and good pro tip, on the rehydrating and knowing why that might be a problem. So
Yes. And
excellent.
another thing about the beak before we get off that topic is if they do bite down on you, don't pull your finger out, but push it in. Because if you push it in, you weaken the leverage that they have.
Oh,
Further.
okay.
So push in, even if they're hurting you, you push in and then you pull your finger out to the side.
Okay. Okay. No, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, it's often when we get I work a lot with raptors, and yes, you have to be very careful because it hurts, and you try not to pull away because you actually get more injured that way too.
Yes, people know this. I think a lot of people, if they've not been bit by a bird, it can be a little surprising how powerful their a little beak like a cardinal beak can be, but it's a small
Right.
beak.
Right. Yeah. Designed to crack those seeds. So, so yes, they can use it for defense too. So there we go. So, okay. So now we've got our cardinals are foraging on their own. They're doing well weight wise. You're really not having to supplement feed much or hardly at all. Now we want to do what are the criteria that you use to say now it's time to open up the enclosure door?
Right. So there's multiple things you want to look at. One is, of course, that they are entirely independent. So not just eating on their own, but also not begging. And cardinals will beg late, um, longer than other species. So they are dependent on their parents. Their parents will actually feed them in the wild for weeks
Okay.
while they're learning how to forage. So they support the bird is eating on its own, but it's also being fed.
Okay.
Um, a lot of rehabilitators worry that the cardinal is too associated with people, but really this is pretty natural for them. And there is a point when they will stop wanting your food, but it takes longer. And this can be a pressure if it's late in the season because they do sometimes attempt a late nest. So fall is
Oh,
coming. You have a baby cardinal. You're like, no, not now.
no.
Um, but another thing I will do is I will make sure they're entirely independent. So they will not accept food from me, even if I try to give it. That's one thing.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. A second thing is I make sure that they're waterproofed. So their feathers have to be in good condition. You look at it visually. Are they looking good or are there bald patches? Are they
Hmm.
sparse or are they scraggly? You want to pay attention to all of that. But if you mist them with water, does the water bead up and fall off like it should, or do they look wet? And if they
Ah,
look
mhm.
wet, then you want to keep them until that waterproofing gets applied to the feathers. And basically, they go to their preen gland and they should be distributing this oil on their feathers, which
Hmm.
kind of waterproofs the bird. But
Hmm.
you can encourage that by misting them with water every day. That will encourage the waterproofing to happen.
Hmm.
Eventually, hopefully, they will get waterproofed.
Right. Okay. So eating on their own, not accepting food from you, and also waterproof. Anything else that you're looking for?
I look for their behavior. So are they able to fly well within the aviary? Cardinals are not strong flyers. They are, given their habitat being low canopy trees, bushes, they kind of do this like sporadic flight.
Hmm.
So they don't fly straight through, but they do this kind of bouncy flight.
Okay.
In the aviary, are they moving around deftly? Are they hopping from the perch, grabbing the insect? Do they look slow or confused, like they don't have it figured out? You really want to do look for how comfortable they are in the habitat that you've created for them.
So all of those things, okay, they're all checked off. This bird is ready to go. You described your aviary as having two doors.
Yes.
How do you, how do you soft release?
So it depends on what I have going on. Sometimes I have to balance out other birds in my care, but if
Hmm.
I have the cardinal alone, just one bird, I can open up both doors during the day.
Hmm.
And I will hang a bird feeder, one that I intend to put outside in the doorway. And then I'll have
Okay.
the food inside, and I'll kind of migrate the food inside and outside the aviary with the idea that the bird can explore further and leave, but it has the option to come back if
Okay.
it needs. If it's not finding the food, it can come back and eat. And
Hmm.
then eventually I'll notice the bird is not in the aviary anymore and it's spending all its time outside. Then I'll go at night and I always shut the door at night. So
Okay.
whether the cardinal's in or out, I'll shut the door at night and then open it up during the day. And
Okay.
a lot of times I've had the bird hang around my yard and go to the bird feeder that I put out for it. So
Hmm.
I know that they're surviving these days and they know that there's a food source. And then
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
they tend to do in the winter is they gather up in flocks with other birds, so other cardinals and other first year birds, adult birds, even other species.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the next year, this bird will be pushed out to find its own territory.
Okay. 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 Have you ever seen, how long have you seen cardinals in your yard that you've released?
Usually about 4 to 5 days after I release a bird, I've seen them around coming
Mm-hmm.
back. Um, and then after that, I tend not to see flocks. I think they tend to flock like there are certain spaces in the city's parks where there's berries growing, things like this, where the
Mm-hmm.
flocks tend to rotate around. I have seen them come to my bird bath in the winter, but at that
Okay.
point, I don't know if it's my bird anymore.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Wish we could all ban the birds that
I
are
think
in
that
our
would be
care.
so valuable if we
Oh,
could do that.
right. Oh, me too. Me too. It gives us so much information. It's long-term information. It's not,
Uh,
immediate information like some of the telemetry and things like that. But still, information is still information, even if it doesn't come for years. It's still
right.
information.
Their survival rate is poor enough as it is. And so if they're at the disadvantage of being raised by these humans who don't know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
well, what what is it like? I wonder what can we do better? What
Right. Exactly. What could we do better?
it is difficult because I'm telling you all these like perfect scenario things, but a lot of us have a lot of birds in our care and we're trying to just make it work, right? So you can't
Mm-hmm.
always do everything for
Mm-hmm.
all the species. But one thing I would say is I think the song is very important. So make that work, get the song there. And then also the release, make sure that the bird has ample opportunity to be in your care. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's different approaches that rehabilitators take, and some are like get the bird out because they don't want it acclimated or getting used to people. But in the case of the cardinal, I really do think you take your time and let that bird decide when it's ready to go. And don't worry, it will be ready to go at some point. But like I said, they spend so long with their parents. 56 days after fledging has been recorded.
Wow. Wow. That is
That
a long time.
66. That's about 70 days from hatching, something like that.
Wow. Well, here's one last question, because it seems like we're naturally moving into the pro tips. But so you get a late hatch cardinals, a couple
Yeah.
of them. Do you
Yeah.
overwinter them then? Or do you get them outside and they're outside for the winter and you keep them for the winter then and then release them in the spring? How do you do it? I mean, because it is so much harder for them in the winter.
That is a tricky one. That's a really tricky one. I would hesitate to overwinter a first year bird because a lot of the critical learning happens during that
Mm-hmm.
first year. I've
Mm-hmm.
had some sketchy last minute birds where I've had them in the aviary with a heat source
Mm-hmm.
to kind of soften the fact that it's getting colder out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've released them with as much support in the area that I can do
Mm-hmm.
for that bird being so late. Um,
Okay.
the other thing I would recommend is maybe seek out a rehabilitator in a nearby warmer southern state where you
Mm-hmm.
can transfer the bird if possible,
Mm-hmm.
where the winters are less harsh. But
Oh, that's an idea. That's an
it's
idea. That you need
difficult.
permits and things like that. You have to get the regulatory
Yeah.
folks involved, but it's certainly doable.
Yeah, it's
That's
really
certainly
a
doable.
difficult time for a bird, and the survival rate is worse for the last hatch birds. So
Hmm.
it's poor anyway. I think the best you can do is kind of give them as much support as you can. So I would, if it happens to me, I tend to put them in the aviary. If the nights are cold, I have like a infrared heater in my aviary,
Hmm.
because of course, birds in the wild wouldn't have a heater, but they also have the opportunity to seek out shelter that is warmer or cooler. And when you
Hmm.
have them in a contained box, they can't do that in the same way they would in the wild. So
Hmm.
it only gets so warm in an aviary.
Right.
So I do provide that supplemental heat just to make it a
Okay.
softer on the bird. And then I'll do that soft release and make a point to provide that food at the aviary entryway. Um,
Hmm.
so that at least they have the chance to, eat in a known location and get
Right.
the bearings and hopefully join a flock and hopefully succeed.
Okay. Okay. Other pro tips you've been the song is critical, making sure that they have that. And also you mentioned, taking your time with these birds, that they need a lot of support for a lot longer than one would think. And that a lot longer than a lot of other songbirds. So they need that. What else? What are some other pro tips?
I think the one I mentioned about hydrating is
Mm,
one that struck me early on in my career as a rehabilitator because I was working in a setting where we were getting a lot of cardinals and there was a lot of aspiration that seemed avoidable happening. So
mm-hmm,
I would say when you're putting fluids into the mouth of a older juvenile where the beak is more like the adult beak,
mm-hmm.
to do that very cautiously and be aware of that angle of the upper beak because it makes it so the syringe just goes in kind
Oh,
of
right in the wrong spot. Yeah.
can be at the wrong spot. Yeah. I think it's very easy to put it in the wrong spot. So you have to be mindful about how you're hydrating.
Mm-hmm,
I think yeah, that is the top things. Give them water so they have opportunities to bathe. That helps with the feather condition. And keep an
mm-hmm,
eye on the feather condition because that is the one thing that I found problematic with cardinals. Sometimes you just get one with bad feathers.
mm-hmm. Yeah. And that might be, if you got your diet as good as we can get it, it might be congenital.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's
mhm.
a lot of reasons, and we don't always know what those reasons are, but we do our best to make sure those reasons aren't originating with us, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, I want to thank you so much for this conversation. This has been loads of fun. I've learned a ton. I know that a lot of people listening will have learned a lot as well. And I do want to just mention the book again, The Hand-Rearing Birds, the second edition, edited by Dr. Rebecca Dewar and Laurie Gage. And you have two chapters in there, but one of them is on grosbeaks and cardinals. And so everyone here should check it out. It's a great resource. I've used that book for lots of different birds. I don't think they've even got flamingos in there. I will not get a flamingo check, but it was fascinating to read anyway.
Yeah, they even have tokens. I mean, wow, right?
Hmm.
They have a lot of, it's such a great book, and so many different experts weighed in on different things. A really wonderful collaboration.
It really, really is. And also, I would suggest Passerine Fundamentals by Veronica Bowers if you can find a copy.
Yeah.
That's an amazing book as well.
Another book I would recommend is the Songbird Diet Index.
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm glad you brought that up.
That is
Uh-huh.
fantastic because it gives you a list of foods that you can find in the wild, but also in captivity, good substitutions. And it gives such a good range. I even still use that book, even though I've been doing this, because I'll forget, oh yeah, you
Hmm.
can add that too. And then
Hmm.
it gives you that chance to really give a diverse, varied diet. And you know that you're on the right track if it's a species that you haven't worked with before.
Right. Oh, that's a great addition to our resource list. So we'll try to put these in the show notes so that's easy access for people to know what resources are out there that can help
Yeah.
you.
And I think another thing to point out is cardinals don't migrate. They just move around in flocks. So we can release them later in the year with a little extra care and
Hmm.
just extra support.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I
Thank
hope
you.
you enjoyed it.
I did. It was a lot of fun to talk. I can talk about birds for a very long time. So this is a lot of fun to do.
Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release is a production of Partners for Wildlife, working hand in hand with wildlife rehabilitators and the veterinarians to support them to improve the welfare of orphaned, ill, and injured wildlife. Our executive producer is me, Gail Buell. I'm the partnership coordinator for Partners for Wildlife with the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine. Our producer is Reese Rosado.